All right. Hey, guys, we're live. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Whiskey Charlie, the War Game Chat, our live show every month on YouTube. I'm Mo from Mo's Game Table, and joining me tonight are my co-hosts, everyone's favorite Gimp with the Limp, Nate Rogers, the Gimpy Gamer. Hey, Nate.
Nice to see you all again. I'm doing well. Hope you are as well.
And the War Game Wizard from Oz, wow. Kev Sharp from the Big Board. How are you?
Hope you are as well. And guys, how are you doing?
And the War Game Wizard from Where Oz. Is that echo coming from?
How are you? We're getting a delay there.
Yeah, we are getting a weird delay. I don't know where that's from, but we also have a couple of special guests tonight, very special guests from Thin Red Line Games. We have Fabrizio Vianello and Tony Morfitt. Guys, welcome to the show, and really happy to have you guys on to talk about your games, and welcome to share everything about your games and hopefully get some more interest, because tomorrow you're having a big day. We'll talk about that here shortly, but welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you to everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. It's my first time, actually, in a live session on the internet.
Well, anybody that is not already familiar with the games, you can go to the URL I've got there. It's trlgames.com, and that will give you all the information about Thin Red Line Games and the 3 games that are currently available from them and what else is coming from you guys. You've got the Dogs of War next and Sacred Oil, which will fill out the big trilogy, the Monster Trilogy. But we'll start off with you, Fabrizio. Let's talk about your background, where you come from and what got you into gaming as a gamer and as a designer, and talk about Thin Red Line Games, and then we'll go to Tony.
Okay. So actually I started with, and I'm still an information technology consultant. That's my main job. And we started in Italy playing games during the 80s. And when we were probably 14, 15 years old. And we almost immediately fell in love for modern wargaming, like The Next War or similar, the old Fulda Gap, and so on. And there is actually quite a big community of wargaming in Italy. There was a big community of wargaming in Italy, and they were quite open to all ages, no problem. So we got to playing with people maybe 40 years old. We were just 60, so quite young. And there I met Marco Cimino, who was the co-founder of Thin Red Line Games. And we started playing a lot, night, day, probably the usual stuff as almost everyone here. And the game that more everything else got us was The Next War from SPI. And we started playing it at least one time each year. And I would say an incredible game, but every time we played it, but the real problem with The Next War basically is that I know that Kev will not agree with me, but the real problem with The Next War is that NATO always lose. There's absolutely nothing that NATO can do to avoid a smashing defeat. Despite this, we kept loving the game. We kept playing it. And 3 years ago, more or less, we had a last campaign of The Next War, and Marco came out with the idea to publish an after-action report, very extensive after-action report about the campaign. And so we started a blog on the internet, and we started writing all the stuff that was happening inside the game. And to my surprise, there was quite a big follow-up for this blog. and a lot of people commenting, a lot of people looking at it, watching it, and Kev, by the way, was one of them. And so we understood that actually we were not alone. That was the first thing. And that an old project that we always had could maybe be feasible. The project was to update the next tour, update with the new information, about the Order of Battle, about the Warsaw Pact weaknesses, about NATO strong points, and so on, and republish it. The first idea, of course, the project took a lot of time because it was more than 1 year for preparing the Order of Battles and so on. And the first idea was to republish it with some already existing publishing company. So we offered the game to several publishing companies. There was quite a nice interest in the project. But the problem is that it's really a project that I had in my heart. And I didn't want to simply give it away. And so after a couple of offers, more or less interesting, in the end we decided to create our publishing company and to publish it independently. And that's it. That's the story of the beginning, basically.
Well, you've done a great job, I'll tell you, in the first 3 games in the series. I know Kev's been a really big proponent of the entire series and of your company, and he's spoken way more about it than I have. So let him jump in real quick, and then we'll go to Tony.
Ooh, I get to say something. Okay.
Talk about prepared.
No, cool. So I think the thing that got me excited, I love upstart small companies that want to do something different and something new and that have fresh ideas. And I love also the fact that you sort of honored the theme and the history of SPI, right? So for me, as a fan of your company and the fan of your products, that all comes together in Under an Iron Sky with the sort of honoring the way the game systems work, but you've refreshed and updated them and reinvigorated them, and your own sort of reinterpretation of the air war, which, you know, as everyone knew in Next War, is a little bit clunky, and you borrowed some ideas from other places, and you've extended and made the game not more complex, but more involved from a choices perspective. So that got me, that's what really sold me on it, you know, because it was a lot of money to spend on a big game. And I took a gamble based on, you know, your designer notes and some of the postings, and the fact that you had such a long history with, you know, with the Next War, and we've often bantered about whether the NATO can really win or not, but that's all fair in love and war. So yeah, it's great. It's a really interesting system, and then your subsequent release, Deadly Northern Lights, just adds a whole nother level with naval combat and convoys and distributed supply and small scale combat units that have, you know, different factors depending on who they're fighting. It's really fascinating and a lot of fun. So I'll shut up as a fanboy now and let Tony say something.
Tony, your turn. We'll talk about your background and your role in the games.
Yeah, okay. Well, I suppose I also, in terms of where I started for gaming, I started with figures when I was about 13, 14. And I have to say, I've never given up figures. I do figure gaming as well. Quite a lot of figure gaming. I write rules for them, etc. But I also found The Next War in about 1977 or whenever it was published. I think it was the first game that I bought with earned salary. By that stage, I had joined the British Army. And I played this huge, great monster of a game whilst I was still at Sandhurst, in the bit of time off that we had, doing doing officer training with 1 or 2 guys the first time I played. And for all its difficulties, I've always loved the game, and I have kept it ever since. Have I played it as often as Fabrizio? No, I really haven't played it as often as Fabrizio. But I came across his blog, the KIA blog, in particular one he's just talked about, of that very intimate, very detailed fight that he had with Marcus in whenever it was 3 or 4 years ago, and thought this looks wonderful. And then I heard that he was rewriting the thing and he was coming up with Under an Iron Sky, and I thought that's the kind of project that I had also wanted to do over the intervening 35 or 40 years or whatever it had been, but I missed that. I had things in my own life. I was coming out of the services. I was moving. I was coming back to the UK, etc. And I was one of the ones who missed the first print run, the first time round, and I didn't get the bloody thing. I was like, where are we going with this? So I got in touch with him, and we talked, and we started bouncing off 1 or 2 other things. And I suppose partly, perhaps my background, having done 40 years in the British Army, having done being a general staff officer and relatively senior and done a few things here and there, we got talking about whether I'd like to come on board for the next project. And I said yes. And we then managed to scrape together and find a copy of UAS for me as well, which is wonderful. So I've had that out and run it. But I really came on board for the DNL, for the last release, if you like. And as I put in my developer's notes at the time for that, the only way I was coming on board is that if I was going to come on board, we needed to look hard at the things that were so wrong with the SPI bit that could be fixed. And the air war was a bit of it, but actually far more important was the naval war. And to get that right, if you were going to do Norway, if you were going to do Denmark, then you couldn't do it without a really decent maritime slice on there. And that's it. I came on board to do that. I helped a bit with with some of the Orbats. I've done a bit of things with some of the rules. I've become the little red devil that sits on Fabrizio's shoulder, whispering in his ear and saying, "You really can't do that. You really shouldn't be doing that. That's not right." And he's been ignoring me entirely every single time. And I keep asking him, "Why do you invite me on board if you don't want to listen to me?" But he does listen.
That's not true. Yeah, you had the upper end. At least a couple of times you had the upper ends.
Anyway, so that's it. So that's what I do. I hopefully provide a little bit of the input that comes with my background, my heritage, if you like, of having actually been one of the last Northag planning officers. I was there when they closed it down. I burnt some of the files. I did all sorts of things. I was there as a staff officer, as I was told, when we did DNL in 1985 when it sat. I was in the UK Mobile Force, and I was supposed to go to Denmark. And we had 6 plans to get into Denmark and not 1 to get out again. So tells you something about what we thought of our chances of winning one way or another. Anyway.
Wait, Tony, that actually happened in my game. I worked out how to get you in there. You never got out.
That's true.
Indeed. So there we are. So that's it. So, and what we're doing next, I'll let Fabrizio lead on, and where I might fit into that one way or another. Well, we'll see.
That's not what I was trying to share.
It was rather interesting.
Image.
So that's it. That's me. I because of the nature of my life, the 40 years I had in a career, I've not got a great name amongst lots of other people. I've got a bit of a name in some figure gaming, but I have played games. I've owned most of them, and I love monster games. I love really big, strategic, operational level games that give you big boys decisions to make, and so that's why I'm on board. That's me.
No, I must say that Tony's contribution to Dead and Northern Lights was invaluable. I can assure you that I really had no idea of how a real amphibious operation was going to evolve and to be planned before starting talking to Tony. Tony really made me discover a lot of details, a lot of things about amphibious operation in particular, naval warfare in general, and I don't think the game would be so good without his contribution. It was really, really great.
That's fantastic. Now,
Go red. So Miss Fanny, where are we?
we'll get Nate to chime in here. I know he's got a couple of questions for you, too.
Well, I got a couple, questions. Everything's rolling around my head. First, I've just got to toss out some mad respect for Tony for spending that long in the British Army. Because when I was in the Marines, we were in Iraq and we ran into some British commandos, right? I don't remember exactly where we were, somewhere south of Baghdad. And we exchanged stuff, as, foreign nations are to do. We exchanged patches and stuff. But they gave me some of y'all's food, and it was god awful. How in the hell did you live for 40 years on that shit? Oh my God. It was this, packaged sweet brick of nasty. I don't even know what the hell it was supposed to be. But
Spam,
packaged sweet brick of nasty, said by an American.
yes,
Brilliant.
I'm not saying
I
our
love
food
it.
was excellent. I mean, we got used to our crappy MREs, but trying yours, man, it was bad. So mad respect for you to be able to eat that for as long as you did.
Only thing I would say to you, Nate, is the solution is to get yourself commissioned, is to get yourself moved up, is to sit in a nice big hairy headquarters where you've got some cooks producing you fairly decent rations. You're not living on the MRE stuff.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you're exactly right. When we actually got some tents at one point, and they had air conditioners, right? And the officers' tent, it went out. They lost their air conditioning, so they kicked out 80 junior Marines, so 3 officers could take the tent. We're talking a tent that would fit 200 people. They kicked all the Marines out, so 3 officers could have it, and we were just told to, go figure a spot out. Figure it out for yourself.
Well,
Being enlisted was the dumbest choice.
Different leadership techniques. I'm not sure we'd have got away with that.
No, they shouldn't have either. They were kind of dirty on that. I am curious though about what your Army background helped you with the naval aspect, because I wouldn't expect an Army officer to have that type of that knowledge. Did you guys do some cross training with the Navy for amphibious assaults?
I have. Okay. Am I? The sharp end of amphibious assaults, I am not going to take any joy about disputing this with any Marines, whether they're mine, whether they're yours, whether they're anybody else's. But if you're talking about naval deployments, you bear in mind we live on an island. Yeah, wherever we go, we're taking kit with us. We go at sea, and in particular, bizarrely, that whole period in my life, the 2 years that I spent in the United Kingdom Mobile Force 1st Infantry Brigade, which had a war role, quite specific war role, which was to go to Denmark. We spent a lot of time practicing, running up load lists, loading ships taken up from trade, occasionally LSLs, but very rarely, because they were normally off with 3 commander brigades and the Marines going up to Norway. So we went in normal ships, loaded them on, got them across, unloaded at the far end, deployed out of it. Were we planning to go in over a beach? No, we weren't. I mean, one of my biggest arguments with Fabrizio is the whole political run-up into this, how much notice there is, how much little notice there is, who was making what decisions when. Ours was essentially based on taking ports. You have to go into some kind of unloading facilities, but that's no different in fact than what has really happened, whether you take it from the first Iraq in 1990 onwards. Yeah, there is somewhere to go where you get off and then you drive to somewhere. We were going to get off in Esbjerg and then drive the last bit into Zeeland or drive down into Schleswig-Holstein. That's in essence what we were doing. But loading up the combined ops, how you set it up there, that's one half of it, was that particular 2 years. The other is as I said, I had a reasonably senior career, and I did quite a lot of, I was what is in modern parlance G5 plans officer. I was in an army group. I've been in modern NATO headquarters, if you like, and a little bit in my own army, and I also did 2 years in a German staff college. So it's just the stuff you did.
That's why you're not complaining about the food.
Apart from complaining about the food, yeah.
No, I said that's why you're not, because you were way up there.
I tell you what, in the days of the next war or UAAS, there used to be within Northag. We used to rank the 5 corps in Northag, which was 1st British, 1st Belgian, 1st German, 1st Dutch, and 3 US corps by their food. I'll let you guess where 3 US corps figured on that timetable, bearing in mind that at the time the other 3 nations apart from mine still had conscription, and the Belgian corps commander used to pull in chefs who were working in, Maxime's in Paris, who happened to be just Belgians doing their national service at the time, their conscription. Their officers' messes served some wonderful food.
Oh, I didn't realize Belgium did that. They have a mandatory service?
Absolutely, they all did.
So they're kind of like Switzerland in that aspect. Everybody's got to serve like 2 years.
Germans were, but they were down to about, I can't remember what the Belgians were on then now. I will probably get it wrong, but it's about 10 to 12 months they were doing. In 1985, Germans had just dropped, I think, from 15 to 12 months they were on, and the Dutch were on 10 months if they were overseas. No, that was the Belgians. There were 10 months if they were overseas, and overseas meant Germany, basically. And 9 or 8 or 9 at home. Pretty much the same for the Dutch.
Sorry, I'm not trying to distract from the games, guys. Just I find this stuff fascinating. I could talk to him for hours about it.
Anyway,
you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah.
The only way 3 Corps could actually have good food is if the Air Force was cooking it.
Oh, the Air Force is great.
I mean, when it comes to the U.S. military, the Air Force is literally, and no offense to our air guys, I do love the Air Force. It's very much a civilian job with a modified haircut and a kind of a dress code. And they have the best food. It's like, hell yeah, you get a chance to go to, when we were in Okinawa, we always went down to Kadena Air Base to eat. I mean, it was, hell yeah, great food.
And pools and decent looking women.
John says he remembers opening a C-Rat can of spaghetti and meatballs, and there was an eyeball looking back at him.
Nice.
Yay, American C-Rats.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And Brant says, Nate, if you want to have fun, give a Brit a box of Pop-Tarts. So is that true, Tony?
By the way, hi to Mrs. Stella that is just arrived maybe 10 minutes ago. Mrs. Stella that is watching us right now, I think. It was a consultant, a contributor for Less Than 60 Miles. He's a retired Apache helicopter pilot. And we gave a big contribution for finding out how to move and use attack helicopters in a modern operation tactical environment. It was quite nasty. It's really, really interesting.
Well, thank you for that, Vincent. That was fantastic. And thanks for filling that out for Brizio. It's really interesting to hear the development process and how many people get pulled into it, because there's a lot more to it behind the scenes than people realize. Before Kev had hit on something, and we talked about it the other day, all of us, about the complexity of the game. And the game is complex, but it's not complicated. It's very layered. Why don't you guys kind of hit on that a little bit, and then we'll go around the horn again. Kev can give his experiences as well.
So actually, the group is normally quite small. There are no more than 2 or 3 people actively involved in a significant manner. But I also have several contacts that maybe help just on a specific part of a game or specific part of the rules. Yeah, that's you, Vincent.
He's internet famous now.
A specific part of the rules, and each contribution is very important because, of course, I have, as everyone else here, great interest in military matters. I read a lot, and I know a little about military matters, but I'm far from being from knowing everything. For example, speaking again of attack helicopters, Vincent explained us the real utilization of FARP's bases, how they were going to move helicopters out from the air bases, the known air bases, right from the start, and how FARP they're going to be used during a conflict with Warsaw Pact and so on. And so each single person that contributed to the game, even in a small part, gave really a insight that was simply not there before, without them. And that's it.
Did you guys have anybody given input from the other side, like the Soviets?
No. We had some input from Finland that you cannot consider Soviet part, but actually we have only one customer in former Soviet Union, and there is not, I think, so much big interest in wargaming in Russia. Maybe they have more fun making brawling in the streets. I have no idea actually, but there are really very, very small feedback from Soviet Union and ex-Soviet Union countries. There is quite a feedback from Poland, for example, but for the old Soviet bloc, that's it. Nothing more. I don't know why. No.
I can just jump in for 2 seconds on that one. I mean, I've had some general feedback, just discussions. I was lucky enough in the last 5 years of my career to be I worked in military diplomacy, so I worked in embassies around the world. And in that particular sort of environment, then you meet people from every single country who has also got an embassy in that particular time. And so I spent a lot of time talking with, well, either the guys who used to be on the other side who are now in with us, or whether that be Poles, Bulgarians, Romanians, and with my background as well, I've had a huge amount to do with Germans, so I've spoken to a lot of East Germans and some fairly senior former East German officers, but also with Russians who my age and therefore were serving at the time. And we've exchanged over the odd vodka here and there some interesting, war stories about who thought who could do what to whom, when, and how, and for how much, and that kind of thing. So you add that to the stuff that you were taught at the time. You add that to flavor or to at least orientate the way that you're reading the sources or you're reading the reports. And the interesting thing about that is when you're into either the design or the development, if you're talking about something, is when you have a contemporary piece of writing, you need to look at A, who wrote it, but B, whether we know any better now. And then sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. And I'll give you a little example. So we're talking about the US Marine Corps. We're talking about when the forward stationing of your own equipment in Norway happened. Now you can, if you just pick up the sources at the time, whether it's Jane's or whatever, they will tell you that this base exists from 1983, 1985 onwards. Well, yes, but you then pick up today's US Marine Corps history and it will tell you, yes, in 1983, we signed the original contract with the Norwegian government. In 1985, the first feasibility study was stamped off by, X, Y, and Z administrative people and went through Congress. If you read Jane's in 1985, it will tell you that there's a Marine forward base. What it actually is a car park with nothing in it.
That's a Marine base.
The actual blowing holes in the side of the cliff, designing the tunnels, filling the tunnels, putting the air conditioning in, putting the environmental controls in. The thing actually opened in 1990.
That's the reason why there is no prepositioning sites in Dead in Northern Lights, because after this initial input from Tony, after some research on the argument, I've also found out that actually there was nothing in 1985 ready for a real prepositioning of Marines forces. And so that's all the Marines.
Same goes for the Canadians, right?
Yeah.
The Canadian story is absolutely fascinating. The Canadians, in theory, signed up to providing cast into Norway in 1967, and then spent from 1967 to about 1983 deciding whether, how we were going to do it, whether we were going to do it, how it would happen, what would be the influence on it. And the government that came, and Trudeau Senior's government, and there's nothing against Canadians, there's nothing political in this, obviously, but just a statement of fact, did very little. So the Conservatives arrived at the early 80s, as they did across most of NATO. Most NATO governments by mid-80s, most, not all, are quite conservative. And they had a real go and said, we're going to do this. And they had a really, really, really big 2-year prep. They redid all the staff work. They looked at where they could get ships from. They looked at how they could get the ships, how would they load the ships, how would they take the kit across to get the whole of 5 task force across there. And then they practiced it in 1986, and it was a disaster. It was a complete and utter disaster. And there you really can, you can go then to everything for all the political commentaries in the Canadian press in 1986, 87 at the end of, and I'm sorry, the exercise name has gone out of my head now, but it's disaster that happened. And then they gave it up, and CAS died a death. Having been for 20 years a firm promise by Canada, in 1986, 87, it was out the window. We can't do this because we don't own the shipping. We can't get the shipping. We can't get the stuff onto the shipping in time, and we can't guard the shipping, taking it across the Atlantic. So we're changing our minds.
So Harold's joining. He says he finally gets here. We're talking about environmental controls. What other wonderful topics did I miss? Well, we were talking about the genesis of the game and how Next War, started the whole thing, and getting a lot of great information. Now, one of the other things I wanted to touch on, or have you guys touch on, was the supplemental information that you have on your website for all 3 games. You've got different operations that can be played. You've got amphibious operations manuals, the works, and then also how to take these 2 monster games and connect them together if you were to dare do so with another manual. I mean, talk about a game with a lot of support and a lot of supplemental, material to go with it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I really love the operational manual. Is something that I really love to do. It's probably a heritage from my first time as a war gamer. And is something that it's really fun for me. It's because what I really love of the operational manual is the military flavor. I mean, it's really some. I try to make them more similar as possible to a real Pentagon paper, and I think that the players appreciate that because they are fun to read, they're informative too, and I really like to make more of them, but the problem that I think you all know by now, we are really a small bunch of people, so I have no time for developing games, make more operational manuals, and so on. But something that I really like. And by the way, there has been a lot of support from other world gamers too. For example, we had the retro rules written using the old SPI format for Under the Narrow Sky. We had the Japanese version of all the free games. That's wonderful things, really, because we have, I think, the only game, the only publishing company with all the games are translated in Japanese, and the more that keep coming. We have a Swedish group that is trying to prepare an alternate order of battle for Sweden. Dead in Northern Lights. There is a French guy that is developing an alternate order of battle for French army in Under the Narrow Sky. A lot of more stuff to come. Let's see what happens.
Well, now Kev has done a lot of things. I know he wants to discuss some of his experiences as well as his discovery of the game, because he's really the first one to bring it out to the war game community, from a coverage standpoint. So I'll let Kev take that away for his first discoveries and then, his journey with the game so far.
Wow, that's a big one.
Sorry, I think I didn't understand a single word.
Oh, that was for Kev. I think he understood me.
Yeah, it's okay. Okay. I think what he wants me to do is talk a little bit about my gameplay experience, and I'll try to be relatively succinct, I guess. The thing that struck me the most playing Under an Iron Sky and Deadly Northern Lights is playing opposed is a lot of fun. It has a great backwards and forth activity between the two players, so that was cool to do. I got a chance to do that a couple of times with smaller scenarios. And then with the larger campaigns, as you're playing, for me, one of the cool things about larger war games is the narrative that comes out and the story that comes out, and you're trying to imagine what's going on, right, with the soldiers in that battalion or that division or in that support element or whatever it may be. But one of the biggest it's also a brain tease for me too, because you have this, you want to go to point A and capture it. And when you start working backwards, how am I going to do that? It's not just a matter of moving your unit up into the zone of control and spending 4 movement points and attacking. You've got to make sure you've got available air to give ground support, and then that air needs an escort. And then you might want to think about, do you want to have artillery with that attack? Or if you're playing with the advanced supply rules, now you got to make sure that they're not too fatigued and that they have ammo and that they're fueled and all that sort of good fun stuff as well. When you play with Deadly Northern Lights, you then layer in the naval aspects as well, and you can do all sorts of fun things with those. So it becomes almost, and I'll use OCS as a comparison in terms of the scope of the planning that you need to do and the forethought that goes into the game makes it a rich solo experience, right? So if I can sit down and look at a section of the map for, a period of time, for half an hour or an hour or whatever, and go, oh, I can do this. Oh, what if I did that? Or how about doing this way? And there's 10 different ways to skin the cat. So I love that about the game system.
Yeah, but the interesting thing of Deadly Northern Lights in particular is that, as Kev said, you have, for example, a classical situation where a whole Soviet division is getting ready to enter in a Western capital. defended only by a single battalion.
Yes.
And you as a Soviet, you say, okay, that's a piece of cake. What's could go wrong with that? I'll just smash it. And after that, you start moving. And after you start moving, you realize, oh, yeah, okay. So he has ships right there. I could give support with the ships. Okay, so maybe it's better if I try to sink or move out his ships before. Oh no, I cannot sink the ships because he has air superiority over the X. So I need to bring a bigger escort for the air superiority. And so you find out just in that you are not going to smash that battalion. It's going to be you have really to concentrate, focus, and have a plan. Otherwise, the battalion will simply stay there, and that's it.
Yes, as the first 4 turns of Dead Northern Lights demonstrated clearly, with one little British battalion snuck into a city behind a river, managed to hold on for way too long. So it does all those things and gives you that rich gameplay, which I think anyone who's going to go buy Under an Iron Sky is probably looking for. And so I had a question, Fabrizio. What do you think? What's the reason? Why are you doing a third printing? And not just because it's out of print, but why is it so popular with people?
Why I'm doing a third printing? Actually, I promised. I declared more than once on several media that never in my lifetime will be a third print of Under an Iron Sky. That's it. But simply the mail and the requests kept coming. No, you have to make a print. You are a dork. You must make a third print. And that's it. And so after a while, I gave up. I knew at that point that there was a quite noisy group of people that wanted a further print. But I was not. For example.
Did Tony ever get his copy? Because he missed out on the first printing.
Oh, I did in the end.
And so I was still not convinced that they are actually enough for having a serious reprint. A reprint of must be at least 200 copy. Otherwise, it's going to cost you a huge amount of money. And so we made the prepaid option. This was the first time for us to asking to pay for the game in advance. And it was a system to be sure that in any case we're not going to lose money. That's it. And the pre-order thing, the prepaid thing, worked great. I mean, we had 200 copies already pre-ordered in maybe one week. And right now we are well beyond 200 copies, and so great. That's a main reason. Popular unrest.
When will that print? When will you go to print with the third print edition?
The physical print.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It just began yesterday.
So when will the ordering close for folks?
Okay, so I promised to close it tomorrow, but we have a problem with that because actually probably the news about this live or I don't know what made another surge in the orders.
Oops.
So as the production printer already actually has already started with a fixed number of copies, and we simply don't have any more copy. So we had to close the orders a few hours ago. Tomorrow morning, I hope I should be able to contact the printer, ask him exactly how many copies is going to print, and it could be that at that point we could be able to reopen the orders for maybe 1 or 2 days with just the 20, 30 copies more that are still available.
Right.
So people can get their orders in right now then.
Sorry?
So people can still order right now if they
No,
really want
right,
to get.
right now,
can't.
sorry, but it's
Okay.
not possible to order. Yeah,
Okay.
I really have to close because all that remained was 3 or 4 copies that I like to have here as a strategic reserve for everything. I don't know, the president of the United States asked me for a copy or something like that.
Weird developers that come on board, that sort of stuff.
I think you're pretty safe from him asking.
So Nate, you're going to get a copy?
Sorry?
I've got to talk to the wife about that one first. There's a limit. We each have a limit. We can't go over that limit without clarification with the other. So I would have to check with her on that one. And my guess is it's going to require many shoes or purses going in her direction. But I think it'll be worth it. Because I'll tell you what, I actually sat down with it earlier on Vassal. I was poking at it yesterday with Vassal and going over the rule book. And in a way, it reminded me of, and I know I talk about this game a lot, but Thunder in the East, but not for the same reasons. It was more of like the aspect that you could tell is kind of a labor of love thing, that there was real effort put into it. Because you know how like war games will have a feel to them, and they didn't go in the direction that Thunder in the East did, was big game but streamlined for ease of play. They went for big game that had realistic aspects to it, and I'm going through it and I'm looking at the different rules in it, and you've got multiple avenues of attack where, you know, what was it, the column, and defensive, and different aspects for defense if you're NATO or not NATO, and all these little rules that get into it. And I didn't even touch into the air war aspect of it yet, and I'm going, okay, these are some people who've put some real time and effort in trying to churn out the best game that they can, especially in this scope, which to me just kind of stands out, because when I first got into wargaming, that's what I was looking for. I was looking for the game that's going to take up my whole table, that I could play for months, that will just be awesome and make me feel like a general there on the table, you know, like I was on the command staff, all that good stuff. And this one is really, you know, barking up the tree for me on that one. And then finding out it can link up with other things. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to talk the wife into this one and see if she'll go for it. Because, I mean, it just looks awesome. And plus, you can tell someone has confidence in their stuff if they put it out on Vassal with the rules. Because it means that they are confident enough that they're going to let you try it because they know you'll buy it. Which is what happened to me, you know?
Yeah, and Kevin touched on something about it being a really great solo narrative experience. Tony, talk about, from the military aspect, having been in planning and everything in the flag officer ranks, what do you see as far as like a multiplayer experience, you know, multiple people per team's playing?
I mean, if you can get multiple people together and they will commit, have I said something that's hacked him off? No.
He's changing screens, I think.
No, mine is definitely. You can. I would tie both what Nate and Kev said together. I mean, Kev said you can do it as a solo experience, and you can really get very introspective with this. It gives you a chance, if you have a major interest in the period, to say, right, well, as I understand, NATO doctrine, Warsaw Pact doctrine was to do it this way. Let's just try doing it that way and see what happens. Or I'd always thought we'd be better off if they'd done it that way. Well, let's try doing it that way. And you can reset and do it again with pretty much the same parameters and get a different result. I think coming to Nate's point, it really does place you in that position, and you get it more so with DNL, but actually now with the new rules that have gone into UIIS, particularly with the new air rules that have gone into there, which has slightly limited ranges, therefore you've got an added complexity without being overly complicated of, where are your air assets, your resources going, because they won't reach everywhere on the board automatically again, is that you've got that real feeling of taking proper decisions at that level. Coming back to then answer the question, Mo, does it lend itself to team play? Oh, yes, it lends itself to team play. I think you have got, and you can break it the way it breaks. It is, certainly if you are putting the two together, DNL and UIS, if you were going to go down that route of madness, and I think one of the things I said to Fabrizio is that, notwithstanding the fact that I theoretically was doing this for real at one stage, having put at least the top map of UIAS in with my DNL, and actually I personally took out the Schleswig-Holstein table and actually just played it on the map because that's what I wanted to do. You really do see why the NATO break line between AF North and AF Center came along the line of the Elbe. You can see where the different things fit in, and it fits teams brilliantly to do that on both sides. Warsaw Pact teams go nicely. You get a front, you get your front air army that supports them. They're the planes you've got. Make a decision, or talk to the big guy at the back who's going to give you what reserve that he has in to do it, because he's placing priorities. Exactly the same on NATO, and you can make that as cooperative as you like, or you can make that as historically simulative as you like. And by that I mean you can turn around and say, okay, you're in Northag, this is what you get, this is what's in 2ATAF, you don't get anything else, because that's the way it was. Make do and mend, make it work, or at least force your boss to give you some reserve because you're in, because you can do the best things with them. So yeah, I think it's got great capacity for a multiplayer game on many levels.
Yeah. I support that completely, because there are really a lot of possibility for multiplayer. Very difficult in this time for everyone to put together a team for playing, but that would be, I think it would be the best use of a game, absolutely. With 4 or maybe 6 players, 3 for each side, it would be great. Yeah.
So, like the other day, we had also mentioned this, and I don't know if I had mentioned. I think Kev nodded his head. Yeah, and I wanted to see if this is something he'd experimented with, or if you guys have any experience with it when it comes to playing this game, because it can get really big with some of these scenarios. Can get really big. The campaign game's really big, obviously. This is the type of game that really, I think, could lend itself to actually having battle plans before you go in, which could be its own meta game on its own. You know how some people like to, draw up their characters to do their RPGs or whatever. You can actually draw up your battle plans for all aspects of the game, and then, bring them into the game. You know exactly what you're going to do, rather than just trying to scratch your chin and figure out, on the game table. Kev, have you ever tried that during the games? And if you got, and then go back to Fabrizio and Tony, have you guys ever seen anyone do that in your tests?
We as a Warsaw Pact, I draw at least two or three battle plans, 2 or 3 different battle plans. Yeah, it was it's absolutely needed for Warsaw Pact, because you cannot simply move your units ahead and hope for the best, particularly in Deadly Northern Lights. You have to plan your naval moves, you have to plan your phases, you have to plan your your air support, and air support, as Tony said, is a completely new layer of problems, because you don't have magic airports anymore that can support and move aircrafts everywhere. So you have to plan the occupation, the repairing, and the making operational of forward air bases in order to move your air forces forward, to move your helicopter forward. You have to plan your submarine screen against NATO counterattacks. You can't go anywhere without planning. So, you really need it. Yeah, that's a must.
I agree.
Kev, your experiences?
Yeah, same here. I used a video and some markers on a map to highlight what the plan was, and then make notes about that as a mechanism to pre-plan, particularly in the north for Deadly Northern Lights up in Norway, because of the complications getting from A to B. It's very difficult in the Arctic terrain. So you've got to do that. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to work it out, right? And then you get into it. And as a new guy getting into the system, you're like, okay, well, you can't really do that. So you've got to then make adjustments, and you learn as you go. And the next time you play. So I'd encourage folks to, particularly with Deadly Northern Lights, to start with smaller scenarios, learn how to get your head around the mechanics of the game and logistics and stuff like that, and then jump into that big campaign with game plans heading into it. But you could certainly make a whole game of just thinking about it, right? There's lots to noodle on.
I must say that one of the biggest surprise during the development of Deadly Northern Lights was how the Soviet Navy was completely inappropriate, underdeveloped for the task that he had to take. What I mean is that despite all the hype on Soviet Navy during the 80s, Soviet Navy is actually has primitive amphibious capabilities.
Not really. They had the Red October, didn't they? They had the Red October, didn't they?
Yeah, probably only that. But they really have a lot of problems with amphibious operations. They have almost no helicopter ships carrying helicopters. They have no helicopter transport capability. They are really they are really a mess. Without the Air Force, they will not stand a single chance. What is really saving Warsaw Pact during a Norway campaign is the Air Force, because the Navy is not at the required level of preparation of equipment needed by a very complicated, complex campaign like Norway invasion.
I mean, if I'd add my 2 pennies to that, I think yes, it very much plays for planning. And if that's your bag, then this really is the game for you. It's if you don't like planning, then it probably isn't the game for you, frankly, if the truth is to be told, because you have got to do it. But what is interesting is, and what's nice about it is the planning is slightly different whether you're a NATO player or whether you're a Warsaw Pact player. And if you're playing solo, you get to see both sides of that, of course. As Fabrizio says, that the Warsaw Pact has has tasks to do and theoretically not for once not the right equipment. It doesn't appear to have. So you've got to use it the way what they have to get in there. Getting in is the important part, and then holding it so that you can then build up using really simple merchant shipping rather than anything that's terribly amphibious, and get that air force forward. Difficult in northern Norway, but not impossible. The NATO one is more about planning as to how do you get there in time to actually affect anything? Because if the Soviet gets it right, he's in everywhere you want to be before you can get there. And if he's really lucky and gets his submarine screen in front and he gets aircraft forward and all the rest of it, it's a devil to fight your way in. So, yeah, it's a game that really, it really is for those who love a bit of planning, actually, one way and another. Great game.
So it sounds like the NATO forces really start the game on the back foot. Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Well, I would say they start on their ass, not their back foot.
The political scenario that runs up to this game is gruesome, to say the least, on the NATO side. It is based on the fact that they do very, very little. NATO is working on the basis of 48 hours of usable military planning time. Before they start, which means that nobody's pre-deployed. Very few are very far pre-deployed. There is some pre-deployment of some NATO stuff. The Sovs can be at sea. You're scarcely at sea if you're talking about Marines. You're spending that 2 days loading them, getting them out, forming them up, and maybe moving one box across the Atlantic if you're Americans. Maybe it's two. I think one of them can get across 2 boxes. Yeah. For the even the Brit guys, you can, with a really, really fair wind, a bit of luck, and some good dice rolling, you might just manage to get some people into Denmark, but you might not. You're not going to make Norway before they make Norway. But you can get yourself into a position off Norway where they don't know where you're going to go. So there are a huge number of challenges to NATO at the beginning, but I don't know what Kev thinks. I mean, from his playing of it, there's some huge challenges. I was the idiot who had to write the NATO plan. There is a not particularly good NATO plan on the website for people who want as a starter for 10, and it's there. It gives you some tips of what you might be able to do for the first 48 to 96 hours, i.e. game 1 and 2, really. But that's about it.
That sounds relatively accurate from everything I read about, that time period and what the actual projections would be if the Soviets were to push in, that they would make large gains relatively quickly since NATO isn't really prepared. And the way that I kind of understood it, since I was very young during that time period, was that one of the bigger problems NATO had is that it was a conglomeration of a bunch of different nations, and the Warsaw Pact was pretty much consolidated. They had like a singular focus, whereas NATO had the American focus, the British focus, the French focus, the German focus. Do you get what I'm saying? There's too many chefs and not one just chief laying out the plan.
Yeah, but that's also touched on. I'll let Fabrizio explain it, that you also touch on that. What Nate's talking about with the revolting mechanic, the revolt mechanic.
Sorry.
The revolt mechanic, when Nate was talking about it's a conglomerate of different nations, NATO, and how, you have to work across different lines for different services with different countries. The Warsaw Pact was basically the Soviet Union and their satellite nations, but even though they wanted them to mobilize and get going to war, they still had to deal with potential revolts. So you have that modeled into the game. So that kind of answer Nate's question.
They actually have a different problem. As Nate said, the problem for NATO is that there is not a single head. Every decision must be a collegial decision, and this brings, of course, a delay, a fatal delay in all the decisions that have been taken. And in particular, as I've been always skeptical on the NATO's capabilities to react quickly in a situation of emergency. And that's the main reason for a 48 warning during the game scenarios. On the Warsaw Pact side, as you said, there is a completely different set of problems because the Warsaw Pact has, of course, practically only one thinking head, the Kremlin. The Kremlin is going to decide what the plan is and when the plan will start and the timing of the plan. But in 1985, the real problem is not in the Warsaw Pact satellite countries' governments, but in Warsaw Pact population. Because in most of the satellite countries, there was already clandestine or official movements of unrest, of opposition against the government. And every Warsaw Pact satellite governor had to take that into account. Jaruzelski, for example, in Poland, had more than a problem with Solidarność, and he wasn't probably able to simply order to the Polish people to march with the Soviets for a glorious victory against the capitalist oppressors. And so Warsaw Pact can face very quickly an unpleasant situation with internal revolts, internal unrest, whole countries that doesn't want to actually move against NATO and so on. So on the NATO side, you have a time problem because the time is working against you, and you take a lot of time for taking any significant decision. On a Warsaw Pact side, you have an internal arrest problem. And by the way, the internal arrest problem worsens as your casualty begins to mount, because one of the possible triggers for an arrest inside the Warsaw Pact countries are losses among the militaries. So this brings the Warsaw Pact player cannot use the satellite countries' forces simply as cannon fodder, because this will mount up casualties and will create additional problems or will trigger unrest in the Warsaw Pact countries.
We'll see if anybody in the audience has any questions, because we're going to try to keep these guys, get them some sleep here, because you have to remember, like we talked about earlier in the show, those who may be coming in a little bit later, this is all over the world right now. We're in Texas, Kev and I. We've got Nate in North Carolina, and then we have Fabrizio in France and Tony over in the UK. So we got a pretty wide disparity of time zones here, and these gentlemen are staying up nice and late to chat with us, thankfully, but we don't want to keep them up all night. But I do want to see if anybody has any questions in the audience. And Nate, did you have any questions?
I'm just looking forward to the third printing, getting it on the table, trying it out. I gotta say, it looks awesome from what I've been poking around at.
Thank you.
Oh, you guys, you definitely did a good job. Like I said, you can really feel that labor of love. Like someone put in the time, they put in the effort with it. It's like you were talking about earlier, Fabrizio, that you were looking for a publisher, right? And in the process of looking for that publisher, you decided, no, I don't want to turn my baby over to someone else. I'm going to run with it myself. And I can't blame you. With the amount of effort that you've put into this, I would want to reap those rewards myself. So I mean, kudos to you for it.
Thank you.
And you as well,
yeah,
Tony.
Not
Yeah,
the UIS, nothing to do with me, but DNL, I'll take some from. Thank you.
Yeah, the problem that the publisher offer what is probably a fair amount of or share of the sell figures, but I have no doubt that their offer is fair and honest. But after you spent 18 months developing a game that you really love, you're not going either way for 4% or 5%. That's
Oh wow, that's low.
that's
Very low. Yeah.
No, I can't say I blame you. You put in all the effort, you put in all the time, you deserve to reap the rewards from that. I mean,
Yeah,
wholeheartedly.
absolutely.
Is TRL ever planning on having a push, pull, or drag sale?
I was going to ask Matt exactly what he's talking about here.
What's a push, pull, or drag sale?
It's something they do with cars, and I'm not sure exactly. Or it's supposed to be push, pull, and
Oh, yeah.
an old game.
Oh, sorry. I really don't know what is it.
Yeah.
I've heard of that before. It's like a dirt cheap sale or something. Like, it doesn't matter how bad it's beat up. If you can push it, pull it, or drag it, you can buy it or something. I'm not exactly sure what the hell he means by it, though. Not when it comes to this.
You push an old car in, but and get like a deal on it or something on a new car. But Vince is here again. He says the fact you guys are being pushed into doing a third printing in just 2 years is a testament to its quality and popularity. And he's 100% right, because this game just keeps growing in popularity, and it's fantastic to see that growth.
Yeah, that's still surprising. It's a really very, very satisfying for me. It's something that what can I say? Really.
So I think I get it now. Matt's saying he wants to trade in vehicles to reduce the price. So either Matt is offering to give you a car, or he's trying to offer up his old copies of Cards Against Humanity to try to get a discount on the game.
Actually, I do have a quick question. So you mentioned that there were some updates to the air rules and stuff like that. So for guys who jumped in early and bought version 1, I'm assuming you just download the updated rules off the website. If I'm going to go pull out UAIS at some point in the near future, that's all available on the website once you release the third edition, etc.
The updated rules for UAIS. Sorry.
You for under the Iron Sky, the updated rules and the Air War, all of that will be online. Yep. Yeah.
Actually, I think that the latest live version of the rules already include the new limitation about the range.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it also includes something of about the special abilities of some aircraft.
Sure.
So
that stealth stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think the current living rules on the website are as for UIS are up to date. They've got everything that came out with DNL is in them, and if and then the rules are mad on top of that as well. Anyway, which you can take a look at, and they will include everything. Right. So it is there. You don't need to worry about backfilling. And the only other thing that you may wish to do, there was Fabrizio had a bit of a tweak with some of the counters on UAIS, specifically the Soviet helicopter counters in terms of their values. You can download those off the website. You can download one or two really minor things that were missed. The Luftwaffe Persian battalions you can now download, and one or two other bits.
Right. There are a couple of Belgian Hawk batteries, and a couple of West German SSM regiments that we completely missed in the first edition.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's not a problem. And,
not a big,
and,
yeah.
and of course, I'm sure at some point, as a special bonus, the north to south airfields on Under an Iron Sky, as well as because we did it for Deadly Northern Lights, so
Absolutely.
how long can that take? Like an hour, 2 hours, 12 hours?
Give or take.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, dude. Sorry.
Well, now let me ask you one more question here, but we have not touched on this, so we'll just touch on it real quick here. And Tony, I'm not sure if you have a part in this as well, but we have not even talked about Sacred Oil, which is the trifecta of the trilogy. And Fabrizio, you can talk about it with Tony as well if he's involved in it, and get a little bit of an overview of what to expect and when that is going to be headed to press.
Okay, so the next game would be the Dogs of War.
Mm-hmm.
That's the second game of the C3 series. That is focused on command, control, and communication. And the third game of the 1985 series will be Sacred Oil, and will be focused on Middle East and Persian Gulf. After that, it's possible that we'll have a sort of deluxe edition of 1985 with all the three games of the trilogy together in a nice box. I would love to have a metal box, but I think that will bring a lot of problems during deliveries, metal detectors, and so on. Yeah.
Fabrizio,
maybe.
that's not a deluxe edition. That's a divorce in a box, buddy.
Absolutely.
And we'll see. Maybe it will be really something that terrible to make, because it's 15 maps, 8,000 counters, and it will be a real mess. But actually, I'll tell you the truth. I love to have it. Really, I want my own copy of that.
I'll tell you what,
I have to make it.
My hand is going numb right now just hearing that, just thinking about the clipping.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, think about it. That would be one of those war games that every war gamer wants to have. They probably never pull it off their shelf, but they just want to have it there to look at and go, oh, kind of like War in the Pacific or Case Blue. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it would be right there.
That's it. That could be the idea. I would love to have it on several tables, actually, but I understand perfectly that could be a sort of campaign for North Africa that everyone want to have. Oh yeah, wonderful. Okay, now let's play chess.
I think if you did do that, you'd have one 3-inch box for the rules and the maps, and then another 3-inch box for the counter trades, right?
Yeah.
And sell those 2 boxes or something like that, one for storage.
Yeah, I was thinking about a box, something like the Lord of the Rings Deluxe Edition with with 3 boxes inside.
You want to do miniatures then? You want to add miniatures to it?
Yeah, it could be. Brezhnev and what else?
So now the next one is Dogs of War. Let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah.
That is the C3 series. We have not even really touched on that. So instead of going backwards and talking about less than 60 miles, we'll talk about the Dogs of War going forward in the C3 series and the differences really quickly about between, I should say, the 1985 series and the C3 series.
Well, they are actually quite different because the C3 series is heavily based, focused on the concept of command, control, and communication. And it's everything based on the infamous observe orient the side act cycle of John Boyd. That is a wonderful concept in my eyes, because it's a completely different way to see the mechanics and the flow of warfare. And you're not worrying anymore about tanks, how many tanks you have, how many missiles I have. You're just worrying about timing. And you just have to get inside the time cycle of your opponent. And so your opponent is going to react slower than you, and it's reacting to a situation that is no more the actual and the present situation. And that's for me, it's a wonderful concept, really, that we try to represent in game. And to represent that in the game, you have to put the player in front of the plethora, the whole set of problems that a modern commander will have on the real battlefield. I mean, your problem is that your troops are not reacting immediately. Your troops will have a reaction delay that could be completely unacceptable for you in most of the situation. So you have to give a minimum amount of orders. You cannot afford to mess with orders, to change your mind every 2 or 3 hours, but you have to keep it clear and keep it simple in as much as possible. And the game tried to represent all this kind of mechanics, and mechanics can be frustrating sometimes. It can be frustrating because what is normally in a war game is seen and used as a tool for the player, that is the command system. In the C3 series, the command system is not actually a tool, but is a problem. So your goal as commander is not using orders whenever possible. You should have a plan and stick to the plan, to the initial plan, and your plan should work. If your plan is not working and you have to change your plan while enacting it, you are probably having going to have some big problems, because it actually means that the enemy prevented you, blocked your plan, and is overthinking you, and so that's the whole mechanism of the game. And we will introduce, by the way, some new rules in the second module of the series, because the first module has actually a lot of counters on the map, particularly for the Soviet. The Soviet having all the artillery battalions of the whole front on the map means that you really have a lot of counters, a lot of things to think about. And so we'll introduce the optional rules to have a more abstract approach to the artillery in order to keep it off map, and to use it in a more abstract way. This does not mean that you simply have artillery points that you're going to use everywhere. because you'll still have the limitations of command control and communication and so on. But you'll not have the physical counters of artillery on the map. They'll be assigned to several level of commands, depending by the nation and by the structure of command of each side. And this should allow the Soviet in particular to have a clearer view of the overall situation. And now let's see if I'm able to show you the map. The map is still a work in progress, of course, but should give you the idea. Okay, so share. And here it is. Oh.
Perhaps whilst Fabrizio's looking that up, if I just come in over the top of that whilst he's doing a bit of work there.
Okay.
Oh, we got it.
I don't know if you can see it.
Not yet.
This is the whole map for the Dogs of War, the next module of the free series. And it covers basically the whole British Army of the Rhine sector, or at least the forward sector of British Army of the Rhine. And now I'll try to show you the two maps combined, because it's quite interesting. Okay. Let's see. Here we are. Okay, these are the two maps. The lower map is the less than 60-mile map, and the upper map is the Dogs of War map. And as you can see, the terrain itself in the Bauer sector is much better for the attacker. There are not so many hills, forests, and so on. Or better say that it's better from a strictly movement point of view, because as I said, there are not much forest and similar. But it's probably worse from a combat point of view, because there are lots of small towns, of cities. There are at least 2 or 3 rivers running exactly along the advanced front. And so there's an overall different kind of problem. It offers a different kind of problems to Warsaw Pact. And now here on the map we're still missing roads, the labels for the cities and so on. But I think it should give you the idea of what is coming out.
That's a great look. Yeah,
okay,
thanks for sharing that.
That's it.
Tony, you wanted to add something?
I mean, I would add 2 things, a couple of things, I think, in a couple of minutes. One is with the very beginning of this process. Fabrizio is just putting the map together. I've actually joked with him is that if you look at the one of the predecessors, the Central Front series that was produced at about the time Next War was produced, 5 Corps came out, pretty good. Hofgap came out, pretty simple. And then BOR came out, and it was a complete rewrite of the rules, and that's where the current rules appeared from, 2nd edition. So we've got a few things to play with. The second one is it's not, of course, just BAOR, and again, we will be having discussions, but that map frontage that you look there, because of the way the German border works and the way those routes go, you end up, if you like to, on less than 60 miles, you're going from the sort of top right-hand corner to the bottom left. Well, in this one, you're going almost the opposite direction, the opposite diagonal, which means that there is potentially, we've got Belgians in there, there are Germans in there, as well as the Brits are being in there, and probably quite a number of Soviets in there. So there are some discussions to be had on where we're going with Orbats, with timelines, and the other one is, of course, the incremental arrival of reinforcements in this area, given where they're coming from, which is Belgium itself, partly from the United Kingdom. And in this one, we do have 3 different start points, a very short notice, a standard notice, and a longer notice scenario, and they've all got to be catered for. I would say, for me, I am really, really looking forward to this. I've started work already. I've been working on the NATO Orbat for the last week or so, since the last conversations that Fabrizio and I had. This is exactly what I learned to do. I was a North Ag planning officer. This was my job for 2 years, but putting it away more than actually doing it, but actually doing it before that. And there are some serious challenges in this game, and it's going to be really good, I think. I mean, we've got a whole bunch of different problems. I mean, I at the risk of annoying all the people on your side of the pond, we've done the easy stuff, US 5 Corps, piece of piss, far too many Americans, not enough Russians, they're never going anywhere. And in that terrain, we've now got all the Russians with all the nasty kit at the time, and little old us, and some Germans and Belgians as well. So it'll be a good one. And command and control, that's the real issue was. And all I would say is that, we're all war gamers, and we're all get used to having the big helicopter vision, picking up the counter and moving it 6 hexes and paying you 4 points and attacking somebody. Well, if that's a division you're picking up, that's, if it's let's even say if it's a fairly, medium average size British or German armor division, that's 15 to 16,000 people that you're picking up. And that's, more importantly these days, that's around about 10,000 vehicles. Yeah. So, changing your mind and deciding you want them to turn around on a penny, just drive into that sort of Walmart car park there, turn around and go the other way, don't work too easily.
Yeah, wouldn't be the first time that I've done that.
Nor I. I would be quite happy, and nor leading it either. Oops. But, it's a bit different doing it as a platoon commander or even as a company commander. I mean, company commander, you really shouldn't be doing it, but as a platoon commander doing it, but doing it as a corps commander is probably not so clever. But just to give you a view of the timeline that one ought to be looking at for these things. The timeline for the committal of 3 US Corps as the Army Group counterattack was about 60, minimum of 64 hours planning time went into it. That's when the first planning meeting, that's when the last point at which you expect the general to make a decision. Now, this is the real one that I would think about and then shut up and walk back, is that if you're that 4-star who sat in, the American in Heidelberg or the Brit up there in North Ag in the back, you're turning around to him and saying, right, in 64 hours time, based on the information that you have now and the best guess of your planners, that's that idiot Morfitt and the other bloke who's there with him, we think the Russians will be here. We should be able to tee up, it looks like that. We reckon we can get 3 US Corps across the start line and into the side of them, and we will win. But you have to make a decision now, sir. And once you've made the decision, there's no going back.
Yeah.
The decision now for 64 hours is what your career and your history is rested on. It's good. It's about making, as Fabrizio says, timely decisions and sticking to them, and that's good game.
Yeah, that's another thing that, as Tony said, you don't see too often in war games. I mean, in war games, everyone, me too, we are used to simply move the counter around. Oh yeah, now I'm attacking here. Oh yeah, oh wait, no, okay, now I'm defending. Now I'll move on the other side. And that is not going to happen in the C3 series or in the real life too. Because if you order a battalion to defend the city, is not going to attack the first Russian units that moves by just because it looks like a good opportunity. Its order are to defend, and it's simply stay there and defend. Maybe he'll fire some shot, of course, but that's it, nothing more. And if you want them to attack, you have to decide a lot of hours before, based on the fact that you think that the Russian will move in front of the city within 12 hours, and you have to decide now that in 12 hours you'll have to attack, or you will attack, and that's the real commander problem. You have to move in advance, to think in advance. Once you have decided, there's no turning back, as Tony said.
Yeah, you're not a rowboat. You're not in a rowboat anymore. Now you're commanding a huge cruise ship that doesn't turn around that fast on a dime. But
Yeah.
let's do one last time around the horn before we close out for the night. Nate, you have any one last question?
Not a question per se, but now he's just adding shit to my list that I gotta get because they're talking these games up, and I'm like, damn, that sounds awesome, because you don't hear, too many games actually taking that into consideration, and I hadn't even thought about it, and hell, I should have. The fact that you don't just turn around on a dime, you do have to, pick your plot, where you're gonna go. And that's how things are going to plan out. I'm used to it from the guy on the ground. I was driving the Humvee shooting a gun. That's as far as I had to worry about. I didn't have to worry about what everyone above me was up to, but I like how that's plotted into the game, that this is what you're planning to do. And if you decide all of a sudden you want to change your mind, no, we don't want to go south, we want to go north. Well, you can't just turn around. There's 10,000 people you've got to turn around. And there's a lot of planning. There's supplies, the beans, bullets, and bandages that all go along with that. And to see that actually simulated, because, really, realistically speaking, most games don't simulate that. You have enemy zone of control, and that's about it. As long as you're not in enemy zone of control, you can pretty much go wherever you like, as long as you pay the movement cost for difficult terrain like forest or mountains or hills or something like that. So this sounds awesome. The fact that they're taking that deep of a look into it, I love that.
Yeah, and the problem is even worse for Warsaw Pact, because Warsaw Pact has an additional inertia in its common mechanics, and also for the simple quantity of equipment that Warsaw Pact is going to move when it is moving an entire army. So Warsaw Pact also have to decide a more strategic direction of attack, and everything goes smooth and when you move in your direction of attack, but it becomes chaotic, messy, problematic, and also dangerous if you try to do something in the opposite direction of attack, or even worse, if NATO is able to counterattack you and force you to react as something that is happening in your rear areas, in the rear areas of your attack direction.
Yeah.
So it was also packed additional and worse problem.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I think back to when we crossed the berm into Iraq, right? We're pushing forward. If we suddenly had to turn around and fight the other direction, you don't have your front line on the front anymore. You've got the guys driving the trucks, the fuel trucks, the food trucks. The rear echelon is back there bringing up all the supplies. You can't just turn around and fight that way. Now, personally speaking, I'm a brag on the Marines a little bit. We're a little better at it because every Marine's a rifleman first. You know, it's drilled into us, but most military branches don't do that. They don't have that mentality.
Right.
Kev, you have a final question?
Yeah, I'll probably just let us get wrapped up. My quick, no question, but quick comment would be, once again, Genesis here and roots come from NATO Division Commander, from SBI. You can see that bubble up out of the game, which is great. I loved that game, but it had lots of big, hoary holes in it, right? So I think I enjoyed the system. It's heavy on simulation, but if you're able to get counterattack going and hit someone when they're in road march instead of being in tactical mode or on defensive mode, there's blood on the streets, and it's a lot of fun to make that happen, right? So good times.
Now, I have one last question. I know it could be a loaded question, but I want to keep it really short to the answers. With how deep and involved this can get, I'll ask this one to Tony, being that he has the connections, and he'll be able to speak this, I think, with the best voice of all of us. How have you guys approached any militaries, any professional militaries, as far as using this as a training tool?
I certainly haven't. I don't think Fabrizio has. Fabrizio will have to say for himself whether he has or not. We haven't talked to the military, have we?
Yeah, I had military as everyone else in Italy. I was a draftee in artillery for just 1 year, and for my military background, that's all. After that,
I mean, your military connections, have you made any military connections to where they could use this as a training tool? Less than 60 miles.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, actually, we had some military connection with Fort Leavenworth, the GSC, that bought a couple of copies. I think that the U.S. Marine Corps also has taken some evaluation copy. They have a center for simulation wargaming too. The Brute Krulak, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And after that, just recently, we had at least a connection with the Italian army too, that asked for a copy. And there is a colonel from Turin, that is going to evaluate it, and it could start maybe some more active collaboration with me in the near future. We'll see what happens after the COVID mess. Hopefully, is ended.
Well, that sounds really great. And gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us and staying late into the night in your respective countries. We definitely all appreciate it. This has been a great chat with you all. And I have the URL for the website there. TRLgames.com is the website for Thin Red Line Games, and you can still get less than 60 miles. It is still showing in the store, for me at least. So definitely go over there and grab it while it's still in stock. And we're going to just sign out for the evening here, but I just wanted to remind you, join us for our next show on June 30th, where we will have special guest Natalia Vojtovic, and we'll be discussing her new book, Wargaming Experiences, as well as her job as a professional wargame modeler for NATO. So it should be a really interesting show. Looking forward to that. And I really appreciate everybody from coming in tonight and adding your questions and your comments to the show. And always thanks to my co-hosts, Kev and Nate. And thanks to you, Tony and Fabrizio, for being wonderful.
Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot for your time.
Later, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a great night. See you
Thanks.
next time.
Good night.
Right.